Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to National Geographic. My name is John Fahey, and I'm the chairman of the National Geographic Society. It's good to have you here, and thank you for fighting that polar vortex or whatever is making for this beautiful but miserable day. Just to start out, several years ago, and I'm at an age where I say several because I'm tempted to say 3 or 4 years ago, but if I were to say 3 or 4 years ago, it really means 6 or 8 years ago. But several years ago, those of us at National Geographic were thinking about how do we tap into this incredible audience we have on a worldwide basis and make some real impact. So where we came out is we decided that we would shine a light on those issues that reside at the intersection of humanity's almost infinite desire or need for things and the Earth's capacity to provide. And we said, you know, that's the place that we want people to understand better. And this was just about the time when the population of this planet was getting to 7 billion, so we started off with the subject of population. Then we engaged audiences in discussions about climate change and about energy. And then some of you may remember that we talked about fresh water, access to water as well. We did that in a variety of ways. So this year we decided to take on the subject of agriculture. And as you know, all of these subjects are very interrelated. And I think this idea of food security is going to be one of the greatest challenges and one of the big opportunities for us to figure out how to make it right. And I ought to mention that the reason we're doing this is that we really want to build the level of understanding among our readers, and we hope that will, readers and viewers and others, and we hope that will ultimately lead to wiser individual choices and better policy, something I think all of you care about. So this year we've done a lot with food. I hope you've seen what we've done in the magazine. Coming up very soon on November 21st, the National Geographic Channel will have a series of shows, a series of nights in a row about food as well. We're doing a lot on our website. And this year we have something that's called Geography Education Week. And that's for kids in the classroom and sort of the middle school age. And this year it's all about agriculture. So we obviously are very excited about what you're excited about, and we couldn't do any of this without our partners from Agree. And I just want to tell you a little bit about them. I want to introduce the 4 co-chairs, and I believe founders, I may be wrong about that, but 4 co-chairs of Agree. Gary Hirschberg, co-founder and chairman of Stonyfield Farms. I told him that my wife and I, are large customers. I guess in the scheme of things, not very large, but we love your products. In 2011, he was appointed by President Obama to serve on the Advisory Committee for Trade, Policy, and Negotiations. Gary. Jim Mosley served as the Deputy Secretary in the U.S. Department of Agriculture during the George W. Bush administration and is a grain and hog farmer from Indiana. That's great. Emmy Simmons spent 30 years at USAID as the Assistant Administrator for Economic Growth, Agriculture, and Trade. Emmy. And finally, my good friend Dan Glickman, who was the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture during the Clinton administration and represented Kansas in Congress for 18 years. Dan. And we have one other special guest who's standing here on the side, and most of you know Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan. And Debbie is our keynote speaker today, and she is the chair of the Senate Agricultural, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. Welcome, Debbie. Welcome, Senator. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dan Glickman.
You know, I've had a lot of jobs, but being head of National Geographic, I'd give up every other job I had for that. I want you to know that. Anyway, thank you, John, very much. And I'm Dan Glickman, one of the co-chairs. My 3 colleagues have already been introduced. And I want to especially thank National Geographic for hosting this afternoon and their Future of Food. The magazine cover, the photographs are spectacular, and the stories are also. So I'm really excited about the partnership that we've had with National Geographic around the importance of food and agriculture. They get some of the best, most thoughtful readership in the world, viewership, just, watching the channel. And so our focus on addressing nutrition and health, research, soil health and the environment, U.S. foreign assistance and U.S. foreign policy as it relates to food and nutrition is certainly something that fits very well with our two organizations. And I want to thank you all for joining us in what I think will prove to be an interesting and enjoyable program. AGREE was launched in 2011 to connect and challenge leaders from diverse communities to build a consensus, catalyze action, and elevate food and agriculture to a national priority. Folks from the farm community, anti-hunger worlds, corporate worlds, and agribusiness, nutrition, health and medicine, community advocates, foundations, environment, conservation, and lots of other communities. And we found that we didn't have anything to put all of this together. Everybody was kind of in their own stovepipe doing good work. So we thought that this would be a very good idea, and with the help of many foundations, AGREE was created. AGREE is a diverse group of interests that has built trust, found common ground, and developed shared strategies for achieving transformational change. And I like to think of it almost a tagline that AGREE is a living think tank, not implying that the other think tanks aren't living that are here in Washington, but it is a think tank that is built on creating policy, collaborating, and then testing it and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and that way trying to move the situation forward. As I know from my tenure on the Hill and at USDA and as co-chair of AGREE, consensus on big challenges is not easy in the food and agriculture space. It's not easy to achieve in this town or anywhere in America generally right now, let alone food and agriculture. Yet we have to forge consensus and find common ground if we're going to move forward. Many of you in this room have shared ideas with us the last 3 years, tested us, attended our convenings, and we appreciate your input and engagement. It's been a premise from the outset of AGREE that food and agriculture must be elevated as an issue of national importance on a similar level to the economy or political stability or health or a whole myriad of other issues which do have that kind of level of priority, because it is a concern to every single person in the world. And as you well know, a secure, affordable, nutritious, and sustainable global food supply is not a foregone conclusion. We cannot be complacent and must take action to ensure food security. U.S. leadership, as well as partnership with developing countries, will also be critical. We at AGREE are very excited about a major milestone in our work over the past week, the release of consensus recommendations and announcement of initiatives on working landscapes, food and nutrition, and international development. For the future of food, we must think in terms of partnerships and work across interests to achieve results. And our recommendations, working with partners across the spectrum, are an important step in that direction. Many of our recommendations and actions fall under the domain of the Senate Agriculture Committee, and therefore under the domain of an honored guest today, an important supporter of our work, and more important, a world champion for food and agriculture, and that's Senator Debbie Stabenow from Michigan. I was talking with Betty Wiggins, and she had a few nice things to say about you. She is from Detroit, and of course I went to school in Ann Arbor, and all my relatives are from Detroit, so there's some of them are still there, so you better be nice to me. It's another election's coming up somewhere down the road. But in any event, Senator Stabenow is not only respected for her ability to get things done, she was extraordinarily responsible for the last Farm Bill. There's just no question about it. The Farm Bill that provided for food and nutrition programs, for conservation programs, for foreign assistance as it relates to agriculture, for farm programs. And it wouldn't have happened without her, because she not only had the skills, but she had the temperament to get people together to get things done. So as chair of the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, she authored the 2014 Farm Bill, is a national leader on food and agriculture policy. We want to thank you, Senator Stabenow, for your extraordinary leadership and also for including us on your schedule. We are delighted to have you join us. Please welcome Senator Debbie Stabenow.
Thanks, always wonderful. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for being a wonderful co-chair of this organization. I also have to say on a side note that Dan Glickman indicated he went to the University of Michigan. I went to Michigan State University, and so, but I love you anyway, Dan, so it's okay. But it is wonderful. Dan's also the chair of our new exciting Agricultural Research Foundation, which I want to talk a little bit more about. So I know I'm in the right place when Dan Glickman's there, so it's always great to see you and to be with all of you and to see so many people who worked with us in getting what I believe is a historic farm bill done in terms of being progressive and moving forward. I also want to thank all of the co-chairs that have been mentioned. Thank you so much, and to John and the National Geographic for all that you are doing. It is really extraordinary. And Greg Page, as executive chairman of the board with Cargill, and I do have to give a special shout out to Betty Wiggins, who's doing awesome things in the Detroit Public Schools. 77 school gardens and counting now. Every time I see you, it's gone up. But it's wonderful, the work that is being done for local food nutrition and transforming the Detroit Public Schools kitchens to be real kitchens that actually you can cook in, not just a microwave, you know, that's heating up some McNuggets or something. So I want to thank Betty for all of her wonderful work, and Orrin Hesterman is president and CEO of the Fair Food Network, who we have worked together on so many things, and being able to, after a long fight on the Farm Bill, get what we call double up bucks, but the new program into the Farm Bill, which I think is so significant to increase the opportunity for low-income families to have more healthy food choices. And I think that's an important landmark policy for us moving forward. I also just have to say, I want to give a shout out to Pam Johnson, who's down here, who was with the corn growers, and Pam was the national president when we were putting together the Farm Bill. And I have to say, as a commodity group, we had wonderful support from all the commodity groups, but no one stood up more than the national corn growers to say we needed a unified Farm Bill that was both about consumers and nutrition and children and commodities and conservation and all the other pieces. So Pam, as a new member also of the board of our research foundation, I just want to thank you again, corn growers, for really being there at a moment when the coalition was being frayed by a lot of politics in the U.S. House, and you played a very, very important role. So thank you for doing that. In looking at all of your recommendations, I would just have to say you have chosen wisely. Congratulations on the areas that you have come to agreement on. Conserving the natural resources that sustain and enrich our lives, absolutely critical. Investing in research that unleashes the vast potential of those resources, absolutely critical for the future. Providing all people with access to healthy foods is a bottom line, fundamental issue that we need to rally around going forward. And I know you have also talked about having a legal immigration system that works, which we absolutely have to have for so many reasons, both for our farmers and agriculture as well as for citizens as well. I believe anyone who has the opportunity to influence American agriculture has the obligation to pursue progress on all of the core principles that you have laid out. I think that that is our charge and our duty together. You know, 4 years ago when I learned I'd be chairing the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee and be writing the next Farm Bill, we sat down and basically my goals looked a lot like what you are doing. Very, very similar to what you have agreed upon. And I set about working every single day to accomplish moving forward on those goals in this Farm Bill. Fighting for every inch, and sometimes it felt like an inch instead of a mile, to be able to get things done to move forward. It was incredibly important to me to make sure that we were moving forward. I have to tell you, there were many days when it was a fight just not to move backwards. But we didn't move backwards because of this wonderful coalition that was put together. And when the dust finally cleared in February of this year, after passing 2 different farm bills in the United States Senate, and actually just a few months after there was a government shutdown, we actually were able to have a bipartisan farm bill for the President of the United States to sign. I might add, he did it at Michigan State University, Dan, so, not the University of Michigan, I don't know. But we were able to get it to the President to sign, and I personally believe, and many have said, that this really is the most progressive farm bill ever, because of a lot of hard work on the part of a lot of people. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's progressive in terms of strengthening risk management tools for our farmers. We strengthened risk management tools, and at the same time, we ended what I believe are wasteful direct payment subsidies that were paid out even in years when the money wasn't needed. So we have directed this now when there is a loss, when there is a risk, when there is a disaster. And that was very significant. Now, the fact that we took that on early, by the time we got to the end, a lot of people thought, ho hum, well, that was no big deal. You have no idea how big of a deal it was to get that done. It was progressive in terms of protecting the quality of our land and our water and wildlife, all of our natural resources, by establishing a system for conservation compliance and putting in place a sod saver policy, which I hope we can expand, by the way, in the next farm bill. And for the first time, we are spending more on conservation than on the commodity programs. Let me say that again. We are spending more on Title II on conservation as risk management tools to support farmers and to protect our natural resources than Title I. That's a very significant change. We made progress in promoting access to healthy foods, as I mentioned before, inspired by a program, and I know they've been done in other places, but in Michigan it was Orrin Hesterman and the wonderful Fair Food Network that put together funding, and I want to give a shout out to Kellogg, and we have so many wonderful foundations in Michigan. I know Kellogg is very active in this organization as well. But the Double Up Bucks program, we fought very hard to include, as you know, in what we now call the Food Insecurity Nutritional Incentive Program. That's going to make it easier for low-income families to be able to expand their dollars, to be able to provide more nutritious, healthy food for their children, and to be able to create another market again for local farmers. We also protected and strengthened the fresh fruit and vegetable snack program, so important in schools. So many children are getting fresh fruits and vegetables in schools, and that's the only place they're getting them, right, Betty? And that's very important. We had a lot of folks that actually wanted to eliminate that, and we were able to keep it in and to be able to strengthen it. There also, of course, was a huge battle over the structure of SNAP, supplemental nutrition, and the benefits. And after an extremely hard-fought negotiation, now 1 penny of the regular SNAP benefits was cut and the structure was maintained. And I tell you what, from where I sit, that was a major, major victory. We greatly expanded support for our local food systems and increased money for farmers markets. And I don't know about your state, but all over Michigan, we are increasing opportunities for farmers markets. And we actually increased the funding 4 times more money for farmers markets in this farm bill. And very important, I believe, is the international aid and the reforms with so many people who are involved in that. There was such wonderful, thoughtful organizations that worked with us to make the most progressive reforms to international food aid in a generation, with a focus on giving organizations flexibility to match the form of help to the demands of the humanitarian crisis. And I know from having had the opportunity in August to be in several places in Africa and to talk to folks on the front lines, how significant that is and how many more people are going to be able to get food because that was done. We made sure that those dollars would be spent more efficiently than ever before. And again, I'm so grateful for the wonderful, thoughtful help and ideas that allowed us to get to the point to be able to do that. In 2008, for the first time, specialty crops and organics were included in the Farm Bill as their own title. This was 2008. And I learned firsthand then as the author of that how difficult it is to add a new title to the Farm Bill. I practically had to give up my firstborn, as Jackie knows, to get that title in there. But in the 2014 Farm Bill, we were actually able to increase the guaranteed, or what we call mandatory funding for fruits and vegetables and organic programs by about 50%. Now, I just want a big picture. A new title in the Farm Bill on fruits and vegetables, organic funding, we were able to increase by 50% while cutting overall unnecessary subsidies by 30%. So that's progress. That's progress. I know how important research is to all of you, and it certainly is to me, and how important it is to agree. And thank you for your leadership in lifting that up as well. And we've made historic investments individually in research, whether it's separately in organic research or specialty crop research, or I think most significantly, we've now established a public-private research foundation, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which is meant to really transform agricultural research and create the ability to look forward in our country. A public-private effort focused on sustainability, on food safety, increasing productivity. We looked at what we've done in medical research. We have a number of different models for this kind of public-private foundation in the healthcare arena. And we modeled it after that, creating the board, which has had its first meeting now. And we have seeded that with $200 million, which we can activate with a $200 million grant back. So for every dollar that we can get in private funding, we unlock a dollar in public funding. So it would make, I know, Dan and Pam and others on the board very happy if someone would just like to write a check today for $200 million. So we wouldn't have to worry anymore about that, right? But it's an opportunity to really say, going forward, rather than having agricultural research based on annual appropriations, and unfortunately, those appropriations for ag research have been cut dramatically in recent years. This creates another way to set up something that can look longer term, and it's very, very important for food and for sustainability and for the future of agriculture to do that. And finally, let me mention another piece which was a real priority for me, and I was very, very pleased, since there was no funding for it in the House, that we were able to significantly create a bioenergy title. This is important not only as we go to new kinds of biofuels, as cellulosic moves very aggressively to the forefront, and other kinds of biofuels. But we have something that we're doing in Michigan as well as around the country called bio-based manufacturing. So instead of using petroleum in tires or in foam that goes in your car seats, for example, Lear is now making a bio-based foam for car seats, and I sound like an ad all the time for the companies when I say this, but if you buy any Ford vehicle today, and the Chevy Volt and many other vehicles coming online, you are actually sitting on soybean foam in the seats rather than petroleum-based foam. Anybody here from the the soybean, national soybeans, yay soybeans. There's so many great things coming on soy, as well as, of course, corn and other important materials. But in the realm of soy, it's very exciting to see what's happening. So you have a seat that, first of all, and I'm not recommending you do this, but you could cut it open, put a little water on it, and it would biodegrade in your backyard. Now, I wouldn't suggest you do that, actually, unless you're done with the car. But how cool? How cool is that? And if you get hungry, you've got something to munch on, so. But we are seeing right now partnerships on tires, tire tread, Goodyear and Ford Motor Company to create a tire tread out of soy. I mean, there are very exciting things happening that will replace chemicals that need a landfill or petroleum by doing something which I call make it here, grow it here. And personally, I don't think we have an economy, we don't have a middle class unless we grow things and make things. And in the energy space, bio-based manufacturing is an exciting part of that. So we have, and there's many other parts of the Farm Bill, and I know you know them, so I won't go through all of them. I wanted to touch specifically on those areas that relate to the agreements, what you have done, your recommendations with AGREE. But now that we have this, and it is a very important step forward on a number of fronts, we need also to look at what more we can do, because it's constantly about moving forward. It's not about getting everything, although I would love it. I would love to be czar for a day or a week or a year and, you know, write a farm bill that was just totally exactly the way I'd like it, although we did pretty well. But the truth is, it's always about moving forward and maintaining and expanding coalitions to be able to continue to move forward and solve problems. We need both to implement the tools in this Farm Bill, and we haven't even begun to implement all of them yet, in conservation, regional partnerships that will be announced shortly that will focus on major efforts to protect our water and other natural resources. But we have so many parts that we need to roll out, and then we need to be looking at how they work and what more we can do. What more we can do on conservation. What more we need to do on improving access to healthy local foods. More on international aid, more on agricultural research, more on bioenergy, more on sustainability. How do we use the tools in this bill, learn from what works and what doesn't work, and then go on and look forward to the future. This process needs to have the broadest possible coalitions, which is why I wanted to be here today. We would never have gotten this bill done without a very broad coalition, very, very broad coalition. And we won't get a farm bill ever again without a broad coalition. So we need to listen to each other and build on those things that created trust and that will allow us to move forward. We need to protect the hard-fought victories, and we need to strengthen areas where we can work together. And I'm going to ask for your help around something that's coming up for authorization this year that I'm very, very concerned about, and that is child nutrition. We have a 5-year authorization coming up about whether or not we're going to move forward to create healthy choices and to continue to support changes that will allow our children to have healthy foods, breakfast, lunch, summer programs after school, more gardens in our schools. Are we going to continue to move forward or move backward? And I have to tell you that when we heard from the 450 generals that encompass the coalition called Mission Readiness about the fact that over 70% of the 24-year-olds, over 70% of American 24-year-olds are too obese to serve in the military. That's not just a health crisis. That's a natural national security crisis. And just as the school lunch program was started basically through the Department of Defense, if you go back where that started, because of a call to create healthier opportunities for the next generation, we need to all work together to make sure in the end analysis we are moving forward and not backward on that issue. It also means that we look for unique ways to form partnerships, and I want to just mention one of those, because we have to be able to respond to the challenges of the future and what is in store around climate change, because our farmers are on the front lines of that. And if we don't do the right thing, they're going to continue to be on the front here of everything that is happening. And yesterday, I had the honor and the opportunity to be a part of announcing a first-of-a-kind partnership that allows farmers to generate carbon credits by preserving prairie and grassland in North Dakota. And this is something that was funded through the Farm Bill, the conservation title. Our Conservation Innovation Program allowed funding to happen that has created the opportunity, and I want to thank USDA for their creativity and Ducks Unlimited, who's been extremely involved in this, the Climate Trust, who helped to figure out how to measure this so that these credits can be sold on the California Climate Exchange, which is what's going to be happening now. Working with General Motors, specifically, Chevrolet is buying these carbon credits, not as an offset to trade it, but to retire it. So that the easements are happening on land in perpetuity to be able to protect these prairie lands and grasslands, and doing it in an economic way that's creating a carbon market for farmers. We can do a lot more of this. There are a number of proposals, number of projects that are happening or can happen that partner on a voluntary basis with farmers and ranchers and businesses and the environmental community, the conservation community. And we have tools in the Farm Bill to help do that. And so this is an area that I think is incredibly exciting. Basically, with the credits, Chevrolet's retiring enough emissions for 4,500 automobiles a year off the road. Not a bad start. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to work together as it relates to the tools in the Farm Bill, and then, as far as I'm concerned, we need to be looking creatively about how we take it the very next step. These opportunities come from talking to one another, finding common ground, and taking action. The threats to our planet, our soil, our forests, our wildlife, our future generations are all too severe to waste a single moment on words or, frankly, on naysayers. We need action. And by the way, naysayers can come from the right or the left. Those who want more reform, as I do, need to join with us in an effective strategy to keep moving forward. In this challenging world we live in, we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of progress. We have to keep working together. Our challenge and responsibility is to keep moving forward and to keep solving problems, not just for Americans, but for people around the world. When I was in Africa leading a delegation, an all-women's senators delegation, by the way, 80% of the agricultural work done in Africa is by women. That's what's going to drive that economy. It was amazing to see the power of sustainable agricultural practices to transform poverty into prosperity. The fact is that the right ag and food policy will play a critical role for our country and our world on so many fronts. Jobs in the economy, protecting our natural resources, slowing climate change, and providing for healthier, safer food supply. with the help of all of you and agree, we're going to continue to move forward, and I'm very proud to be your partner. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator, thank you so very much for your optimism, for your hard work, and for joining us, and for your partnership. We really appreciate it. Well, good luck over there. That is not a job any of us would covet, I think. Right, Dan? Thank you for coming. I'm Gary Hirschberg, one of the 4 co-chairs. And now we're going to actually hear from another of our supporters and partners who is not able to be here, but let's cue up the video from Secretary Vilsack, excuse me.
Hi, I'm Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. Sorry about my voice, I got a little cold, but I'm pleased that the National Geographic and Agree are co-hosting this afternoon's event. Although I cannot be there in person, I hope that you enjoy an afternoon full of engaging conversation that delves deeply into some of our most pressing agricultural policy questions. Each of you here in this room is keenly aware of the challenges we face as we move food from farm to fork. We are responsible for securing a food supply that can meet the changing needs and satisfy the demands of a growing world population with increasingly sophisticated tastes. We must build strong operations that can withstand risks from all sides, and we must seek out new research and new technologies that will help us to use limited soil and water resources more efficiently. We must ensure that healthy food moves from the fields where it is grown to where it is needed, and that customers and consumers can trust that the products that they find on grocery store shelves are wholesome, safe, and of the highest quality. We must do all of that while standing unwavering and adaptable in the face of the record drought, extreme temperature fluctuations, increases in pests and disease, and other severe weather that puts our farms and farmers at risk. These are significant challenges, but they're not insurmountable. In order to solve them and meet the nutrition and sustainability demands of tomorrow, will require more than just farmers, ranchers, and agricultural researchers at the table. We need the best and the brightest innovators and thought leaders from across disciplines, which is why I'm so excited about your participation in today's forum. Know that USDA stands ready as your partner as we prepare and adapt to get ahead of tomorrow's challenges. The future of American agriculture depends on your continued leadership. Thank you again for your partnership as we secure the health of our farms, food systems, and communities across our great nation.
Now the challenges that the Secretary and the Senator have both talked about today are really the areas, as the Senator mentioned, where Agree has brought together some of the really best minds to solve problems. I admit, as an entrepreneur, my wife refers to me as a pathological optimist. And when we started Stonyfield back in 1983, nobody was eating yogurt. No one knew what organic was. We say we had a wonderful company back then, just no supply and no demand. So I'm an optimist. But I've learned in this process of Agree that it is possible to bring great minds together to achieve consensus. The enemy here is partisanship, and the enemy is our own absolute certainty of our way. But by building consensus, which has been very difficult, and as you talk to our advisors at the reception later, you'll understand that it's not been easy, but it has been achieved. After a lot of hard work among an exceedingly diverse group of co-chairs and advisors, we've been able to achieve consensus on a compelling vision and recommendations and 4 critical issues that you see up here on the screen that will serve as a roadmap for action. Our Working Landscapes program that you'll hear more about, international development, food and nutrition, and immigration reform. Now, having set a path forward in these areas, Agree is now pivoting into action, focusing on implementation through partnerships. And tomorrow, we'll expand the family by adding 100 more partners who will come together to help us to demonstrate integrative approaches on the ground and communities and to achieve policy change in Washington. Our work on implementation has already begun. For example, Agree is now working with the Minnesota Agri-Growth Council on implementing our Working Landscapes Partnership model with landowners in the supply chain in Minnesota. Agree's model is a producer-led collaboration to address continuous improvement and environmental outcomes in specific watersheds. Key elements include a focus on soil health and measurement so that we know if outcomes are actually improving. We're also exploring demonstration projects right now in Wyoming, in Colorado, in Indiana, and we'll be soliciting more from around the country. On international development, we're bringing together producers in the food and ag supply chain to advocate for permanent authorizing legislation for international food and ag development. U.S. policy has critical global implications, as the Senator just described. And on food and nutrition, of course, we continue to be an important bridge between those doing innovative work at the local level to cultivate healthy communities with policymakers in Washington. And there are more initiatives as well. We have a fabulous initiative that we'll be announcing soon called Farmer Corps to get young people on the ground with actual working knowledge of how to grow, mentored by the average farmer age here in this country, is 58 years old. So to bring the usher and help the next generation not only onto the farm, but to avoid the costs, so that steep learning cost, so that they'll actually be successful. We will continue to serve as a venue for the discussion of complex and controversial issues that would benefit from Agree's unique platform, this platform of compromise, this platform of building consensus, such as working on GMOs, on school lunch, or on waters of the U.S. We invite all of you to join us as we move forward on this implementation. You can visit our website, which you'll see up here, or you will see in a moment, foodandagpolicy.org, where you'll see our consensus recommendations and a contact us link on the homepage. And we invite you, please, to contact us. This is boots on the ground now, folks, to turn these words and turn these agreements into real action. We want to note that our work continues on many additional initiatives, as you see up here. Research and innovation, local food, risk management, next generation. And all Agree is focused on 8 initiatives now, and there are more coming. Lastly, before we turn to the panel, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to the people of Agree. First of all, I want to thank the 33 advisors who are all here today. And again, you'll join with us at the reception. These are advisors are wearing blue name badges, and I urge you to reach out to them and ask about the process and ask about their own perspectives on this really hopeful path forward that we've worked so hard to engineer. I'd like to also acknowledge the Agree staff who've clearly helped us reach this milestone. Executive Director Deb Atwood down here and her team based at Meridian Institute have done a phenomenal work of herding us cats through this process. And they're listed on our program. And of course, the 9 foundations who were the founders, who really made this dream come through, and obviously without whom we would not be here. They too are listed in the program. So now we're going to move into a provocative panel of leaders who represent diverse aspects of our food and ag system to discuss policy solutions from farm to fork, engage in some dialogue with all of us here today, and end with some inspiration from National Geographic. I should remind you this event is being live streamed. Please join the conversation with us on Twitter at #FutureOfFood. Agree is tweeting from #AgreeAgPolicy in case you're not already following us, but please do. And now it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce a real maverick, a real hero, and a real important inspiration for all of us. Please welcome Dennis Dimmock, the Executive Environmental Editor of the National Geographic. And thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you all. I'm here as the moderator of our panel, so I'm going to introduce everybody one by one, and everybody can come up and sit down. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so we'll cut to the chase. I would like to introduce Greg Page, who's Executive Chairman of the Board of Cargill, which provides food, agricultural, financial, and industrial services and operates in 67 countries. Pam Johnson. She's the past president of the National Corn Growers Association. She is a 6th-generation Iowa corn, soybean, and hog farmer in partnership with her husband and sons. Anim Steele, who is an Agree advisor and founder and executive director of Real Food Generation, an organization which harnesses the power of youth and universities to build a healthy, fair, and green food economy. I want to hear from you. I have 2 college-age daughters who I'm sure would be interested in your work. And Betty Wiggins. She is the executive director of the Office of School Nutrition at the Detroit Public Schools, where she's overhauling child nutrition 1 meal at a time for the district's 65,000 children. So I'll come over here and sit down with them. So we're going to be handing out audience cards for you, so you can write down your questions, and at about 5:40 or maybe a little bit later, we'll pick them up and we'll start getting your questions and the questions from our everybody out there across the world on the live stream through their Future of Food hashtag questions. And so from there, I will move over here and we can all sit down and get relaxed. And thank you all for being here. So we've been availed of a lot of proposals and ideas. Many things to talk about and not a lot of time, but the key points, we're talking about international development, working landscapes, food and nutrition, and immigration reform. And in one sense, you can't look at any of them separately. They all have to be looked together holistically. And I'd like to start with you, Greg, because you are dealing with all of these issues now across the world. And your business is essentially both local because you're dealing with farmers on the ground, but you're also trying to look at this on the global scale. Well, so why don't you give us your response and ideas about this?
Thank you, Dennis. There's an old African proverb that I've used oftentimes in talking about this very issue that Dennis has set up about dealing with things collectively. And if we're going to have a more food secure world, and that adage is, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I think as a company, I think everybody in this room wants to go together because we have a big journey to undertake. Making the global food system work for all of its stakeholders, whether they're farmers or at the far end consumers, definitely requires all of us taking this journey together. At Cargill, we're engaged every day in trying to make this system work and frankly to understand it. And we feel that at one level, the global food system is complicated, but really it's very simple. At the same time, what we know for sure is it's incredibly unforgiving. And that if we don't make good collective decisions, that unforgiving nature of a global food system will come home to haunt us. If we want the long-term outcomes that I think we all aspire to do, we need to take a very holistic approach. There are 5 developments that are influencing the path of farm to fork. Clearly there are many more than that, but I'll comment on 5. 1, increasing global consumption. The second, the changing appetites, and particularly the increased demand for protein in the global diet. Third, the increasing demand for arable land for renewables, and Senator Stabenow talked about that. Government policies that are inhibiting trade and the sharing of food resources. And 5th, and importantly, climate change. So with respect to policies that will help the world become more food secure, we believe the most promising solutions rely upon 6 core principles. First, honoring comparative advantage, growing the right crop in the right place using the right technology, and then sharing those outcomes collectively across soon to be 9 billion people. And I cite as a good example of that China, where the decision was made that rather than trying to be self-sufficient in soybeans, that they can grow 2.5 tons a hectare, they would put their resources to work growing 10 or 11 tons per hectare of corn and purchase their soybeans from countries like Argentina and Brazil to everybody's net advantage. Second, enabling trust-based free trade, planning, again, relying on comparative advantages and allowing us to move crops from places of surplus to places of deficit. Third, and really importantly, supporting commercial smallholders and differentiating in all of our discussions the difference between a commercial smallholder and a subsistence farmer. Every time we talk about smallholders without making that differentiation, we minimize our opportunity to really address the great opportunity that lies there. Fourth, making something happen in Africa. Fifth, embracing the role of science in the food system. And again, the senator talked about the importance of research, and it's one of the pillars that we see in AGRI's work. And finally, preserving and enhancing the resilience of farmers to deal with evolving climate change. So against that backdrop, I think we can go a long way if, in fact, Dennis, we do go together.
Greg, you mentioned making something happen in Africa. Give me a little more detail on that. Does that deal with extension, self-reliance, improved farmer productivity? What?
I think it's all of the above, but if I had to pick a single one, I would have said property rights. That it's unlikely that we're going to get the kind of investment against increased productivity given the variability, the unevenness, and the unreliability of property rights. So if farmers can use their land as collateral, and if they can invest with confidence that it is in fact their farm, I believe if it had to choose a single thing, without property rights, I think all of the other efforts are going to bear less fruit.
Great, thanks. So Pam, you perhaps have perhaps a more watershed scale view here, a landscape. You're close to the land, and you've seen these proposals. How do you respond to them, and what are the things that you find most intriguing out of them?
First of all, I think what excites me the most is the call to consensus by AGRI, and that it should no longer be a debate about organic versus non-organic or small versus large, and that with 9 billion people or 9.6 billion people by 2050, the world needs all of us. So I really appreciate the foundation of AGRI having a place where diverse people from all walks of life and diverse attitudes can come together to work collectively on problems, because in my world, I've seen too much warring against each other, and I don't think that the world can wait. So granularly, on our farm, we're fortunate enough to have the next generation back from college with us. So what that means for us is that the older generation gets pushed or also leads, but exciting things happening, as you said, literally in watersheds on our farm. We're participate in 2 watershed projects, one a Spring Creek one. So we've learned how to plant cover crops. We've learned from our peer groups. We've learned from going to a lot of meetings. I've certainly been blessed being able to spend one day on the farm and the next day in DC advocating for policy that affects not only my farm, but farmers like me. So I think that AGRI is on the right track with not only the framework, but the call to action that Senator Stabenow laid out for us. We've all been blessed, and so we've all been called to that responsibility, what that means, not personally on our own farm, and then also as ag leaders.
Out of the proposals that we have seen today, are there any particular or outcomes that you would like to see more than others?
Sure. I mean, I could go through the whole list of 4 of them, but I see, and Senator Stabenow has been one of my mentors because I've watched her work to bring people together. And I think that's what it's going to take. So back in the rural communities, what it's going to take with those projects, whether it's the granular stuff, cover crops or strip tilling, or what fits in each topography. It can be different where I live in northern Iowa and a farmer in North Dakota, or one in Georgia. But together and collectively, we can figure out what that is, and we can help peer to peer.
So you're saying change coming from the ground up, grassroots community, that's just as important as from the top down.
Totally, I agree.
Anim, so you of 2 people on the panel today are focused on engaging with young people. And as an Agree advisor, I assume you've been involved in some of these discussions. I'm interested in seeing how you see these proposals and the possibilities and what excites you most and perhaps what you might most want to see come out of this in the next stage.
Well, like you said, I kind of come into this room and the work and agree with a sense of good news and bad news about the youngest generations of Americans. And bad news is that they are growing up at the intersection of a lot of the problems that the senator talked about with health and the environment and the economy. And the good news is that many of them are doing something about it. So just this past Saturday, I was in Brooklyn, in outer Brooklyn, on a farm that was being tended to by teenagers from the neighborhood. It's a predominantly African-American, Latino neighborhood. And that farm and the farmers market and the gardens around it are a significant source of fresh produce for that community. And so what's less, and that kind of thing you can see in all parts of this country right now. What's less visible, I think, is some of the work that young people are doing to create or rebuild supply chains which are equitable all the way through kind of longer supply chains. And that's part of the work that we're doing. It's what I'm bringing here. The Real Food Challenge is our campaign, and we are trying to leverage the power of universities to create those kind of value chains. And we do that by supporting students to encourage their universities to buy at least 20% of their food from local, sustainable, fair trade and humane sources. And the outcome of that is creating markets for small and mid-sized farmers, both at home and abroad. So in Kentucky, for instance, Kentucky has about 80,000 of such farmers. Many of them are tobacco farmers who are losing their markets. And so as they begin to transition to diversified crops, they're losing their markets, but they don't want to lose their way of life. And so our work with the local groups there is to make sure the universities, the leading universities of Kentucky, are available as a market for those farmers. And I could talk about other examples, and bananas and fish, but I won't right now. So so I just want to highlight that there is a rising demand, I think, almost maybe a generational shift in a desire for food that supports farmers, that supports the environment, and that supports social justice. And that demand cuts across race, class, and geography, in my experience, especially with millennials. And that also that demand is not enough. That individual demand does not always translate to change, especially in the segment of the food economy, the half of the food economy which is food service, food eaten away from home. And there's reasons for that I won't go into. But what it takes is work. It takes organizing the demand. It takes kind of shifting from being an individual eater to being a citizens together. And also it takes work across sectors. And so that's part of the reason that I've been interested to be part of Agri, because I think working at from our different perspectives and across that is very helpful. Now, I realize I didn't answer your specific question.
Well, so then in terms of outcomes, do you have any particular things that you would like to see your initiative connected to as far as the goals here?
Yeah. One of the things that we're working on with, one of the main things I'm interested in is in waste. And waste is something that I think links to profitability as well as nutrition. So there are, and this is embedded in kind of across some of these, the principles. And so as our work in Minnesota, for instance, is looking at the large amount, 50% of produce can go waste, and half of that at the farm end. At the same time, cafeteria food buyers are paying grade A prices for grade A fruit, and the cosmetically imperfect fruit is being plowed under, which is a loss for the farmer. So what if we could buy food or cafeterias could buy food that they're going to chop. They don't need it to be cosmetically perfect, and offer income for farmers and also lower the price of cafeterias. So I think that kind of work is embedded in some of the principles of
Sort of rehabilitating ugly fruit, making it
Yes.
desirable, right?
Let's relax our beauty standards for
Right.
some of the fruit. Yeah.
Thank you. So Betty, you're a steward for the lives of 65,000 children every day, and tell me how. And you're deeply involved in food, nutrition, and health, which is one of the key parts of this. Tell me how you see this and what you'd like to see.
Well, one of the first things I want to make a comment on about the cosmetically imperfect. Right now, I'm working with the food service director in the St. Paul and the Minneapolis Public Schools, and we're working with growers, local growers, to try to use some of that fruit, because he's absolutely right. You know, when you chop it up and peel it and put it in Jell-O, who knows if it's grade A, but it still has the same nutritive value. So some of the things that you were talking about, we are actively engaged in. What I see as one of the most important things, as one of the largest purchasers of food in the state of Michigan, only the Department of Corrections purchase more food than I do. So that's that. I have to say that every time I go out. So, but I feel it's a responsibility for us in child nutrition to be purchasing healthy food, not only just to improve the health of our children, but the economic well-being of our community. If people ever looked at what USDA dollars were intended for, they were about health and economic well-being. So we in Detroit Public Schools have decided that the agree principles, yeah, we agree in terms of food, nutrition, and landscape. We are doing things to educate our children. We think that agricultural education is important since they cut out health because of dollars. That our school gardens are playing a very vital role in getting the kids out and having kids to understand where their food comes from and the importance of food. Things that the senator mentioned. I think the CNR should be a plank in Homeland Security and the Defense Department. So that way we'll make sure it's funded. So move it out of ag, move it somewhere where they really have an understanding, and it will be funded. I think that the farmers have a more investment in the reauthorization of the CNR than we food service providers do. Because when you start talking about buying local, when you start talking about increasing access, we're gonna get it from our farmers. One of the things that happened when I attended an agree convening about a year ago was I met someone who was in local food, and I've now gotten just really jazzed up about local food and being part of that association. It's a house in Midland, Kentucky. But it allows us an opportunity for buyers and sellers to get together and determine what is in the best interest of this economy, our agricultural commodity. I'm going to take care of kids. The USDA makes sure that I do that because they give me rules. While people are saying they're very strict, they're not. This child nutrition program should be prescriptive. There should be rules, just like the WIC program. And dare say, and I won't say, I think there should be some prescription within the SNAP program, but we can talk about that at 6 to 8. But those are the important things that we need to know. We need a food and ag policy that does do things to ensure life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It needs to be an enabling and empowering policy. In Michigan, we have something called a Good Food Charter. We say food should be healthy, it should be fair, it should be green, it should be affordable. Not just for poor children, and that's another misnomer, not just for poor children. It's not only poor children families that are getting some of their calories from the food pantry. And if you ever went to some of the big box stores, it's not just poor mothers putting empty calories up on the line. So we need a solid policy and a solid set of principles that address the needs of all children. Hunger, food insecurity. If the calorie, whether you're hungry or you're food insecure, if the calorie has no value, it's going to have the same effect. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I feel about feeding children and feeding our nation, and how our nation's ag policy should ensure that we are producing healthy people. It was the Secretary of the Army, I heard him on C-SPAN, I didn't hear him at the Senate, but I heard him on C-SPAN, who made that statement that caused me to go back to my office that very day and cut off all the deep fryers. and take away the sugary drinks and start using brown rice. Because I do think that the CNR it should be a national defense or homeland security, wherever. But if we're going to raise healthy Americans, if we're going to energize our agriculture economy, we need to ensure that we have good food that's fair, that's healthy, and green and affordable.
Great, thanks. So we're about time for questions, and I'll say those of you in the House who have your questions, please pass them to the aisle. Those of you out there in the larger world, send them in on Twitter. And in the meantime, I want to ask you one more question, Betty, and and then Deb Atwood, who's Executive Director of AGREE, can come up when we do the Q&A. So Betty, is it correct that in your school system now that food is actually being cooked and prepared in each of the schools or some of the schools, no longer just in these centralized distribution areas?
We used to have 22 base kitchens. Now we have one because you still have some small schools. And I just have to give credit where credit is due in terms of the equipment that I was able to purchase to make this conversion. It came from the USDA. It came out of the Healthy and Hunger-Free Act of 2010. It came out of MRISA thing that we did in 2008. So that equipment became made available. The Healthy, Free, Hunger-Free Kids Act have training, all the things you were talking about. And as far as Millennium, the kids, the garden attendants that I have in my garden program are the young kids. And we're hoping that we can continue those kind of programs. Yes, I'm not plucking chickens, or anything like that, but I am steaming vegetables. Not yet, anyway. I'm steaming vegetables. We're making sauces. School lunch it's not exactly five-star dining, but we're not doing the little frozen meals anymore.
Okay, great. Anim?
I wanted to add something to your previous question, if I can.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, and it's about the recommendations I felt in some ways most passionately about, even though it wasn't exactly my work, and that's the international development set of recommendations. As a dual citizen of Ghana and America, and as someone who grew up in West Africa, I was kind of drawn to them personally. And they were the ones that also provided me the most thought, and I had to grapple with the most. Because on one hand, I think some of the recommendations were right on and represented a lot of hard work, and that has to do with the smallholder farm, attention to smallholder farms. I believe the qualifications offer now to reforming food aid, positive stuff. On the other hand, I thought there is a potential for unintended consequences. And as an example of that, in Ghana, there was a project in the north of Ghana that was promoting high-yield soy to farmers. And things didn't go as expected. The rains didn't come in time. And so they lost the crop. And they also lost they were left with the loans that they needed to buy the fertilizer and other inputs. And also didn't have the grain the seeds to go for the next year. So that's just an example. I think when we think about poverty, which is what so much of this is about, not just thinking about income, but also about vulnerability, because that's also what poverty is about. And there are ways in which we can increase productivity and with technology that also increase vulnerability. And so I think there are a lot of ways to think about this and address this, and maybe the most important is to have inclusive processes and consultation with the people who are most affected, and in this case, small farmers around the world. And so I felt like in our AGRI process, we didn't have that as much as I would like, and I have challenged my AGRI colleagues to do that going forward. And especially, you would think it's hard to do that because the farmers are over there, but there's organizations like Via Campesina, 200 million peasant farmers and landless people around the world who are organized, who have affiliates in this country, who can and should be part of the process. And I think if we do, we can really exemplify the best democratic principles of not just AGRI, but of our country.
Okay, great. So I'm going to read a question, and we'll see who wants to step up. It says, I read in the recommendations the idea that there should be a standard of stewardship or expectation that ag producers should set a minimum level of conservation to be held to in the community. How are we going to get producers to accept this?
Well, I think one of the ways is, as Senator Stabenow outlined, is this farm bill was a new farm bill. And it not only provides food for hungry people when they need it, it provides assistance for farmers only when they need it. And that the majority of the assistance or the support of the government will now be in conservation programs. And so how do you get farmers to move to those? It's a risky thing to do, to try something new. So the National Corn Grower Association with other groups has gotten together and started a program called Soil Health Partnership. And it's much like AGREE, it's a coalition. And it gets a lot of people to the table, but then it does research on specific demonstration farms out where we live on the ground. You can go attend those demonstration plots, and you can also read about the aggregated research that's done. And so those little hubs will help people to see how they can adapt new technology to their farms, whether it's strip till or no-till or cover crops or windbreaks, all of the conservation things. So it's a great beginning, I think.
Okay, so a question from the audience for our panelists or for Deb. Why are you focusing on international development? Aren't other players already doing that?
I can take that. Okay, how do I turn this deal on?
Is it on?
Is it on? Okay, yeah, okay, guys. International development. We live in a global system. Food and agriculture is local and it's global, and it has become quite apparent that the work that's underway is really important, and AGREE wants to join in broader coalitions to pursue international development authorization legislation. And we are being challenged, I think, in a very positive way to be inclusive in that effort. But I think the idea is to join with fellow people who are working in this space. We see ourselves as connectors and inclusive people trying to achieve what we think is a national priority, and that is to elevate food and agriculture, not only domestically but internationally.
If I might add to that, it's not the agriculture that my parents operated in. We all operate in a global marketplace right now, and we are all connected. So it is in our best interest to make sure that we're working on international programs in food and agriculture. A big piece of that is education for women and girls, and women farmers.
So this is on the same thread. What can be done beyond U.S. food aid to help address hunger in Africa?
What can be done beyond? I think
beyond food aid, yeah.
On food aid, I think our panelists can also speak to this issue. I think plenty can be done. Education, research, extension, economic development, nutrition are all pieces that are important to the fundamental livelihoods. So I really would call upon some of my colleagues here to discuss this.
I spent a year in Africa and Sierra Leone back before the Civil War. Not our U.S. Civil War, but their Civil War. Yeah, just get it. And I was out in the rural area, and I kept thinking to myself, it would be really great if we had an extension officer from Michigan State University out here providing some education and support to some of the farmers and the women. I was working in a mother-child care craft center, and I was providing nutrition education. I was actually teaching breastfeeding as a dietitian to mothers. So it's that kind of work, I think is absolutely essential. And let's not forget that this is a global situation now. It's not just about the U.S. I live in an international city. Canada's just across the border. But we don't deal with it as Canada being just across the border. It's part of our economy. It's part of our food shed, in our farmers market and stuff. So, you know, there is a lot we can do, not just for Africa, and there's other fragile nations as well. But I think just a good extension officer sometime could be helpful.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but to me the key for Africa achieving its agricultural potential is off-farm income. And that if we're going to have sustainable agriculture in Africa, by definition, it can't be based on transfer payments or aid. And so all the things that we can do to allow African countries to trade with us and to create the kind of jobs that will allow an urban blue-collar worker to pay a price high enough to the farmers who are trying to reinvest in their farmstead, that's the ultimate solution. If there is not more off-farm income than we have currently in Africa, we won't achieve this. A great place to go visit is Zaire, excuse me, Zambia. And with $4 copper, suddenly there was off-farm income that flowed through the economy. And to see the amount of gains made in the last even 6 or 7 years in Zambia as a result of off-farm income feeding back with a price signal to farmers all across Zambia, it's easy to see and observe.
So this is for Betty. And this is not about kids, but it's about parents of kids. Do you have training for the parents of students on healthy foods?
Yeah, community involvement, community engagement is really important. We have parent resource centers, and we also have menus that we send out. We have a website, a different kind of parent now. You know, you text the parent. You know, you can't do. We used to, I used to spend days putting menus in backpacks to set it. Now I can text the parents. We do robocalls. To parents, we announce things. That's so important. Not just for parents, but also for the communities, because the parents sometimes it's the granny, sometimes it's the babysitter, sometimes it's some other form. So we are trying to integrate and involve all of our systems of communicating. It is the way we're going to make this change work, but we're going to have to change community food. So that the message isn't just in my cafeterias, it's at that gas station where a lot of people in Detroit are getting their food from, a lot of people in certain urban areas. It's at the farmers markets, it's all over. And all of that's made possible. If I do a commercial, I think I do better than our senator, through the CNR and some of the things in the Ag Bill. SNAP education is important, that allows me. WIC, farmers markets. There's just a lot until we change the food system and how people think about food and the impact that food have on their lives. You're not going to make any changes in some of the other things. And I know parent education, reaching out to parents, engaging parents, is one of the first things that we do.
Great. So Senator Stabenow and several panelists discussed the importance of grassroots local involvement. How will AGREE ensure that local priorities will be honored and incorporated in its policy solutions?
Well, all politics is local, as we can see, and I think that the gridlock and the vitriol in Congress is borne out by the fact that communities themselves are maybe not connected with their federal policymakers in some cases. But I believe our work in working landscapes, it's about locally driven, watershed driven decision making. Our work around nutrition, food and nutrition, we have discovered that there's so much going on in communities, in counties, and at the state level that if we can capture, and we have, the innovation that's happening and bringing it up to the policymakers in Washington and maybe in their state capitals, we can see that kind of connectivity. We see us as connectors and catalysts for people that we've discovered in local communities. I see that's where the innovation is. That's where people live, whether it's working lands or food and nutrition. It's happening so much at the community level.
Okay, so we're out of time, but I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more, so let's be crisp, and here we go. Question regarding climate change. Can you share what you think is the single best solution for farmers to adopt? Is there something that those who are in the production world are thinking about more than others?
I would say there's no silver bullet. It's many things. And farmers have always faced volatility, and especially in the last 3 years, I say anymore, there is no normal year. Every year is different. And so I'm very thankful that I have the access to the tools and technology now that allow me to adapt, and we continue to learn. So those technologies of having seeds which can send down roots 12 feet to soak up every drop of water with a drought-tolerant corn, and having those traits when we need them is very important to us. And then moving forward, it will be so much of what we took the science to the farm with genetics, we now need to do with soil health. And so that's another big, huge arena where we're constantly learning, and we need to keep continuing to do what we do and build that soil health. That's a whole nother world below the ground with the microbes and how everything interacts. And once again, it's all connected. So I'm excited about the future and the tools and technologies that we have available to us now. So we can, as we combined our corn this fall, before it got 15 below zero wind chill this weekend, we had cereal rye that was 6-8 inches tall that was beautiful coming up, and that will hold everything in place throughout the winter and provide, soak up every little bit of nitrogen, and then provide cover all winter long, and then have organic materials. So great innovation out there. We live in the best of times now as farmers.
Great. Well, you mentioned genetics, so I'll end with a hot one. How can AGREE help fight the anti-science attacks on GMOs?
Wow. Well, as one of our advisors said earlier today, we don't have a dogma in that fight. I know. But I think, we did not have consensus on the GMO issue. But going forward, I think having the platform to have the respectful exchange of information, and we actually did learn through our dialogue that we had regarding GMOs, that there's a lot that we could still discuss going forward that includes science, that includes values, that includes the interests of consumers in this discussion. It's science plus, and I think we know how to have the dialogue, the respectful dialogue, and I look to my co-chairs for the effort there.
If I might add again, I was in Rome at the FAO when the Deputy General made the announcement, Graziano, that looking forward to what the world is going to need by 2050, and all of us farmers will have to more than double our production, whether you're organic, whether you live here in the US or Africa or Argentina or Brazil. And a piece of that will be the tools and technology and the biotechnology and GMOs that will be needed as a piece of getting there.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for being here. We've run over, but I think it was a productive use of our time. Thank you to all of our panelists and to Deb and to AGREE. And for those of you who are interested, you can follow our coverage of this issue at natgeofood.com. Our October issue actually has a great story on genetics in the food system. So thank you all.
And are you going to turn it over to our...
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Turn it over to
Yeah,
the...
come on. Okay, we get that Jim and Emmy are standing between you and the Spinosaurus, so we get that. But Jim, please, with some concluding remarks.
I've got prepared remarks, and they're going to take too much time. What we need to do right now is just applaud the panel and to simply recognize that what you just observed is a microcosm of what we've been about for the last 3 years now, I guess, with AGREE. We've come together. We've laid some really difficult and challenging issues on the table. You heard some of them today. There are more. We brought a very diverse group of people together. They come from different backgrounds, from different disciplines, have different perspectives, and yet we put together a process here that allowed those individuals to express themselves and to say, this is what I believe. And as a result of that, we present to you today as a beginning, kind of a different way perhaps for agriculture to think about itself and begin to look forward to a future of hope in which maybe we can solve these problems after all. Because I think there is somewhat of uneasiness out there amongst farmers for certain, but maybe even the public at large, that what's really going on here? And what we are trying to do here is to address some of that anxiety. I would also suggest, and as I heard here, in one of the questions, how's AGREE going to do this? AGREE isn't going to do anything except link people together, watch the conversations, and then glean what is essential and necessary for us to come to a better place in agriculture. That's the best summary that I can think of. So I'm going to invite my co-chair, Emmy Simmons, to come up, and she'll give you the real answer. Oh, yeah.
Jim is always challenging to follow in these kinds of things because he makes all the really good points and then he says, well, now someone else will make those points. So that's kind of what I was asked to do, was to kind of reflect on a few of the themes that came up in this afternoon's conversation and that perhaps have also emerged in the conversations that AGREE has had over the past 3 years. The one group that I'm not sure has gotten quite enough sort of shouting out today is the advisory committee, the team of advisors. Because the team of advisors that has really informed the AGREE discussion, to my mind, has been sort of key to the diversity, the integrity, the commitment that AGREE is trying to express. The three themes that I think keep coming out are partnership, learning, and adaptation. I think we've heard all of these three themes 10 times this afternoon, but let me just make one little comment on each one. First one on the sort of partnership, consensus building, moving to action. And that again goes back to the point of AGREE advisors and many of the other people who have been consulted by AGREE, and people like Betty Wiggins, who have invited us into their communities, introduced us to 200 people, and then said, well, you should listen to all these people and really figure out what they're telling you. And what we have discovered in all of those conversations is that, in fact, there are so many ideas out there, and there are so many people working on innovations and having sort of good instincts as to what should be done. I think Pam Johnson just mentioned the Soil Health Partnership in Iowa. Jim has mentioned a number of groups in Indiana that he works with. It's building on that sort of grassroots recognition that we are at an important time in global food and agriculture, and that we, as Greg Page said, we need to go together to kind of figure out how that's going to happen. But we need to walk outside of the boundaries that we normally occupy. I normally occupy international development assistance, kind of the international organization kind of context. And then I walk into Louisville, Kentucky, and I meet with the mayor of Louisville, and he says, we've got tobacco money, and we're going to turn that money into a local food system that brings in young farmers, that delivers healthy food to our growing fantastic community of gourmet restaurants, and we're going to make it work for everybody. And when you get that kind of walking outside your own comfort zone and listening to those innovative stories, I think that's the point when in fact that dialogue begins to take root. And I hope as we move forward, as Jim said, with this whole host of partners that we have, we're going to make it work. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't underscore the point again that many people have made, is that we really, really do need science. I think we are in a tremendous time of change. And agriculture, by definition, the production part of it is local, right? It has to do with the soil in a particular place, in a particular country, so many miles from a tarred road, etc., right? So such access to groundwater, some access to surface water. So it's very location-based. And when we come up with kind of a solution, oh, we should have more efficient irrigation, well, that, has a few kind of assumptions built into it. So the third theme of adaptation is a theme, again, that I think we've heard sort of echoed several times this afternoon, and I know has echoed throughout many of the AGREE conversations. And Greg Page, I think, touched on it, and Anim touched on it. We talk about a global population that's going to be 9 billion people. But in fact, a lot of those people are going to be young. In Niger, in West Africa, 67% of the people are less than 25 years old. 2/3 of the country is under 25 years. What kind of a future are those kids going to have, right? So we need to kind of think about the age distribution, the urbanization. Betty's talking about teaching urban kids how to grow food, where it comes from. It's very much that theme. I thought also the point, someone raised it in a question, about the level of vulnerability and risk. How do we adapt our way of thinking to that level of risk and vulnerability? So with that, I'm going to thank all of the panelists today, our advisory committee, our executive director, all of the Meridian staff, my co-chairs, everybody, you know how you do this. And then thank also National Geographic for really being a terrific host in this adventure. I think as we move out to the reception, we're going to see the fantastic display about food, and we are also going to be able, as you walk out of the room, to get a special copy of the National Geographic. What is it? It's a specific document on the future of food. So with that, we're going to look forward to a reception, but before we do that, we want just a short National Geographic video called Anthem that was used by the Nat Geo to launch the Future of Food series. And we just want to share that with you before we go off to the reception out that way. Anyhow, I'll get back to you after the video. Thank you. Nobody's singing. It's not working? Oh, no. That fantastic Peruvian lady with the potatoes. Anyway, you will see, I did a quick run through the Future of Food exhibit, and you will be just blown away by the photographs, by the interactive stuff, and of course there will also be some comestibles out there. So with that, I will direct you out of the doors, across the courtyard, and back toward the front of the building, down through that sort of plastic-covered place. And we will have 2 galleries open to us, one called The Future of Food, which is on the right-hand side, and one on the left-hand side, which has this amazing thing called the Spinosaurus. So all of you who have little kids or grandkids, make sure you see the Spinosaurus and have your picture taken by it. I am also told by Heather that just go over there. Do not worry about your coats if they're hanging out here. We will transfer those over to the museum and your coats will follow you. So just enjoy the reception, enjoy talking to other folks. Remember that Agree advisors and co-chairs will all have blue name tags, so ask us any questions you like. Oh no, we got it? Do you love those potatoes? I mean, I love those. Yes.
Food is connected to nearly everything we do. And everything we eat was grown by someone somewhere. Yet from farm to fork, we're disconnected from our food like never before. And while it's the biggest thing we do, there's plenty of room for improvement. Fortunately, improvement is something we're especially good at. We produce more food than ever, but could be better at getting it onto people's plates. We have choices, but not all of them are equal. It's a big, complex problem with lots of moving parts. And the decisions we make now will determine whether or not we're ready to feed 9 billion people by 2050. Join us as we investigate the future of food. Because no matter who you are, what you do, or where you live, we all have to eat.
I'm actually glad we saw that. So with that, thank you all for coming. Join us for the reception. And thanks to all of our panelists and our hosts at National Geographic. Thank you.